I'm not Satan. I didn't want any power at the church. I didn't sleep around at the church. What else? I wasn't whatever you said.
You weren't paid by a random
I wasn't
Korean
paid by
church?
a Korean church. I'm just a guy who started looking, did some research, and left. That's very possible too, guys. It doesn't have to be. If anyone leaves, that there must be this major thing that they were trying to, do in the church or get from the church, or it doesn't always have to be a drama or some gossipy thing. It could just be someone just researched and left.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to another interview with a former WMSCOG member. And this one's going to be, they're all special. Every member we talk to obviously is special, and their stories are different and unique. But the former member we have on today is one that I know Kelsey and we've both wanted to talk to for quite some time now. And this is somebody that I'm sure many of you, at least, who have been involved in the WMS for a number of years will recognize. So tonight we're going to be talking with Ron Ramos. And before I let Ron kind of give a quick introduction of himself, we also have Kelsey here tonight, who is co-hosting with me. We're going to be giving Anthony a little bit of a break tonight. So Kelsey was willing to jump on and kind of do this with me, because she's pretty familiar with Ron's story. And so I thought that she could add kind of a good perspective to all this and ask some helpful questions that I'm sure questions that a lot of you will probably be curious about as well. So Kelsey and Ron, welcome and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan, for having us. Thanks, Kelsey, for being here also.
Well, Ron, for those who might not be super familiar with you, could you just introduce yourself briefly, kind of just explain a bit about your history in the WMS and I guess just kind of what brings you here today?
Sure. So my name is Ronnie Ramos. I was formerly known as Missionary Ron. Joined the church, I believe it was 1999, roughly. Got out of the church roughly 2011. So I was a 12-year member. I'm sure some people who are going to listen to this video who are out will remember me a little bit more as far as my exit. They pretty much everybody joined after me. There was a very small church at that time. There was a few people there who had been there for a few years before me. I'm not sure when the WMSCOG got there, but I want to say it was around 96, 97 when they first came to LA and opened the church. First church was in Sunland that I know of, and then I think it branched off to Chicago, but then we opened another church in more of the Woodland Hills, Canoga Park area. I was there for 12 years. I left in 2011 due to a story that I'm sure we'll get into, reasons why I left. But I was introduced to the church by my sister, Tammy. She's no longer a member. She left when I left also. She met somebody on Santa Monica Boulevard. I don't know. Can I use names, Jordan? Without being in trouble?
That is, I'll leave that totally up to your discretion. Okay. I think we'll be good. I think it'd just be a matter of if you personally want to protect information about specific individuals, but I'll leave that to your discretion.
Okay. So there was one brother at the time that had met my sister Tammy, Will. His name was Will. He met her on Santa Monica Boulevard, preached to her about God the Mother, and Second Coming Christ. My sister, who contacted me, had been calling me over and over again several times. You got to come to my church. You got to come to my church. You got to hear the message. I actually used to call her Church Lady whenever she called. I think I had her in my phone as Church Lady. So whenever she called, because she was so passionate about it. And eventually I went to the church, did a Bible study or two for a couple of times and ended up getting baptized. I think on my second Bible study there. It was with John Lee at the time. Yeah, I think he's a pastor now. I think he was a pastor when I left. Yeah, he was a pastor when I left. So I studied with him. He baptized me. Same story as everybody that I've been listening to. Didn't know the name, didn't learn the name. Back then, you never learned the name before you got baptized. I think they started teaching about the name, Ahnsahnghong before baptism after a while. But back then, we just thought it was Second Coming Christ. I think I heard a couple of people say they just thought that was Jesus's name in Korean. Same thing, I just thought everything looks good. Bible studies look good, and that must be Jesus's name in Korean. And they did the prayer in Korean. So, strangely, I wouldn't expect to hear Jesus, even though I don't think that Jesus can be translated in Korean. But I guess you don't think of that at the time, that maybe, you should have heard at least Jesus in there.
Right. So when you first joined, then was this like the very early stages of the WMS coming over into the U.S.? What was the branch that you joined? Was that the first branch in the United States, or just one of the first ones?
No, first branch in the United States. That's the first place they came when they came over to the United States. And it's funny. I'll just tell this quick story, because I don't want to forget. But the Bible prophecy said something about the east to the west, and we were told a story later on that Mother actually stepped foot in San Francisco, but didn't open a church there. And then our church was, instructed by her to open in LA, but she actually did step foot in San Francisco at one point. It was just a story we had heard, because that was the furthest point west, I guess. I'm not sure. But at the time, that was the first church. There was probably, I'm going to say there was a lot more Koreans than there were Americans at that time in the church. There was probably about 12 to 20 Americans at that time. And a couple of them were families with a bunch of kids and a couple of other people, but it was really, really relatively new. There was much more Koreans at that time than Americans.
So in your time there, a little over a decade that you were a member, did you see a lot of growth and expansion in the WMS in the United States in that time?
Oh yeah, quite a bit. Yeah, we were spreading out. We had the Chicago, before I got there, Chicago had been established. They did, because they had mentioned about how they wanted to do New York, Chicago, and LA, and then work throughout the country from there. That was the goal. That's why those three branches were the first major branches, LA being the first one, Chicago being the second. I think New York was the third. But yeah, that was their plan. But yeah, it was relatively new.
And Ron, how many people did you bring into the church?
Oh God, I can't even count. Quite a bit, quite a bit. Probably, maybe, I don't know. I would have to say over the 12 years, maybe 80 people, 70 people.
Wow.
Personally, that I had preached to, and that I had, maybe more than that, I'm not sure, but definitely through my preaching, a lot of people came to the church, and that's where the real issue that I struggle with, how many people came through.
Yeah, but how many people have left as a result? Because you mentioned that, people probably know you more from your exit now. And
Yeah.
I think that's an understatement.
Yeah.
Because, when I was, because I was baptized in 2007, so you were still a member at that time. And I was in Seattle, and Seattle was a branch off of Los Angeles. And I remember them telling, like, the members who came from Los Angeles, like Alex and Crystal and Melvin, they would
Alex and
tell,
Melvin, the brothers.
yeah, they would tell us stories about your preaching. And I remember one saying they would always praise your preaching and how bold you were with preaching. I remember them telling me a story one time of you being at a stoplight, like in a car at a stoplight, rolling down the window, preaching to the car next to you.
Yeah. I was pretty
I mean,
passionate about it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think a lot of because you left like over 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many of the newer members know your story, but for those who are longtime members who've been in, they know who you are, and it's so like the fact that you're coming on to Great Life Studios and doing an interview it's pretty crazy to me, because you are really the first person from a U.S. branch to leave the church and speak out.
Yeah, especially at that time, because and Melvin and Alex, I just want to touch base on them. I'm almost certain I preached to them at one of the colleges. They were such, and they lived in the neighborhood of our church too, but they were such beautiful, beautiful guys, man. They were so
Yeah.
humble and young, and just beautiful, beautiful guys. And then I watched them change throughout the years and become more, militant and kind of form into that aspect, which was hard for them to, because they were such beautiful guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, once I left, there was a kind of a, prior to me, there was, there would be one person that, you'd ask to not come back to church for specific reasons, or there'd be another person. But when I left, there was kind of a little bit of an outbreak of people leaving, because a lot of people would contact me and wonder, where's Missionary Ron? Why isn't he at church on a Saturday? And it was pretty tough. And a lot of, it's strange, because throughout my preaching, I was so passionate, and I would even tell the men's group, the youth group, even if I fall away, don't leave mother.
Yeah.
Don't leave mother. Satan can work on any of us. Even if you see me fall away, whatever you do, don't leave mother's side. And I've had a lot of brothers that I've reached out to, and they kind of brought that up to me. And I was like, gosh, I'm stuck there. I did tell you that.
Yeah. No, I said the same thing. I remember, telling the members, I said, don't let your faith be reliant on someone else's, especially mine, because if I fall away, you have to have faith strong enough to stay.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And so I remember.
Well, I was just going to point out that the thing about that is that you can find that same level of devotion in any cult, or any religious group for that matter, whether it's a cult or not. And so just to kind of dissuade people from possibly latching onto that and saying, see, he knows this is the truth, or knew it was the truth, and he just left for, diluted lies or bad reasons, to say that that's not the fact. That Ron, in the midst of being in that culture and being just soaked in that atmosphere of the WMS doctrine, that he would say to other members, don't leave, even if I do. I would put money on it that you would find that same sort of thing communicated in any number of groups, where they feel such a level of devotion and certainty about what they're believing in, that they would say, even if I fall away from the Mormon faith, or even if I deny Joseph Smith, or if I deny the Watchtower Society, or Allah, or whatever, fill in the blank there, they would say, well, don't follow my example. I've just lost faith, but you should continue on with faith, or so on. And so just to hopefully discourage people from locking onto that unnecessarily.
Yeah,
and
correct.
And Ron, when you left, a couple of other people left too, right?
Yeah, Diane Sims, Jeff, Tim, Cecil. We had a little reunion in Vegas after that. About 6 months after that, we all got together in Vegas, and really had a nice time, and hung out poolside, and just had a lot of conversation. But yeah, there was quite a few. Quite a few. There might have been about, at least 10 to 12 right off the bat, after they had talked to me after, several weeks. And I explained to them about what I had found online, things like that. They, there was a bunch of people that I knew that I could talk to openly about what I found online, that would be more apt to listen. And they kind of left right away. And then a few, then after some time, a few other stragglers kind of also left after contacting, things like that. But
so what were some of the things that you saw online?
Well, so you know how. So let me go back a little bit for a second.
Sure.
because I want to explain why I left and then why I even looked online. Let me just get into that real quick, if that's okay. So around 2011, it was right around, no, well, I don't think it was Passover. It was before Passover. So it might have been around January or so. In 2011, the pastor got up on the pulpit. He was giving a sermon. And at one point he had said, your stupid boyfriends and your stupid girlfriends are, causing you to not do enough for the gospel. He literally said that, John. He said that, and we had been going through a bunch of sermons that had been a little more hardcore than I was accustomed to, a little more putting pressure on, and a little more kind of downing people or taking people's spirit away as opposed to building it up, which I was accustomed to. So after that service, it was a Sabbath day. I waited till the last service and I went in and talked to John. And I said, Pastor John, can I talk to you for a minute, openly as your brother? And he said, oh, yeah, Ron, of course. They always say, oh, yeah, sure, yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. So I said, the sermon today. Oh, actually, let me back up a little bit. After that service, a lot of brothers and sisters, because they kind of came to me, I was actually kind of the person that they could come to with open, honest questions, and I wouldn't shun them or treat them differently. I would kind of take it in and address it. So they kind of knew they could come to me, but they came to me and said that they feel really uncomfortable with a lot of the sermons lately. They feel more depressed than uplifted, So I had went to Pastor John after that service at the end of the Sabbath. And I said, can I talk to you openly? He said, of course. And I said, Pastor, your sermon tonight, some brothers and sisters came to me and talked to me and said it was really negative and it made them feel, down. And I said, Pastor, I said, to lead an army, especially a small army, I said, the general in front of the army, even if they're small, is saying like, we can do this and we got this and we're stronger than we have God on our side. So I kind of explained that to him and I said, but I feel, and I asked him, I said, is everything okay with you? I kind of felt a kinship with John at the time. So he said, oh, yeah, no, I'm fine. And I said, do you have an outlet to talk to? Sometimes I know it's frustrating. The gospel's not being preached as quickly as you would like or whatever. He said, oh, yeah, I'm fine. He said, and he listened to everything I said. And he said, okay, Ron, Missionary, thank you. That makes sense. He said, I'm going to try harder. I'm going to do better. And I felt okay with that. I felt like we had a good conversation. The next day I had it was a adult men fishing trip that we went on that I was leading for the adult members. And on the way back from that fishing trip, one of the members got a phone call and then they told me, they said, oh, Missionary, Pastor John wants you to go in his office when you get back. So when I got back, I went in Pastor John's office and he was like, oh, Missionary, I need to talk to you. He said, you asked me if I had an outlet. And he said, I have Mother. Mother is my outlet. Really, this is all guided by Mother. He said, you don't understand sometime. And I was like, oh, I said, Pastor, it's fine. I said, I just came to you just to tell you what other members were saying. But I did include myself also. I said, and I kind of feel that way too. So he had told me, he said, yeah, I have Mother, Missionary. He said, anyway, he said, what do you feel about becoming deacon again instead of missionary?
Which is a level lower, right? Yeah.
So demotion.
A demotion. So I told him, and this has been the truth from the beginning of my time with the church. I said, Pastor, I never cared. I was always promoted without ever going after anything. I said, I don't care if I'm a brother, a deacon, a missionary. I said, it doesn't matter to me, Pastor. That's fine. So then he said, okay. He said, then next Sabbath day, I'm going to put a sign out in front of the worship area saying that you are no longer a missionary, you're a deacon.
So to announce your demotion to the members, got it.
Yeah, outside the sanctuary. So when they come in, they'll read the sign. And that would have been really fantastically comfortable for me. I know he would have assumed that.
Yeah.
So I was like,
wow.
That's fine. And then after that, that's when so to catch back up to your question, that's when I said, man, that was weird. I said, that was kind of like a mafia move, like a strong arm move, or that's not a brotherly loving move. After I came to him openly and talked to him about something that was a concern among congregation, among the members. And at that time I said, I'm going to start, I want to look up some things. And that's when I went online and started looking up some things. And I ended up contacting, the church in Korea. I started doing all that research. At that time, that's when we started doing the research on the church in Korea, the split church, the one that was split.
The NCCOG?
Yeah. I remember reaching out to them. They sent me some stuff, and along with, I think Michelle was gathering some stuff at that time. I ended up linking up with Michelle, who I didn't even know about at the time. But yeah, and that was it. And then I didn't go back for a couple of weeks as I was doing the research. But yeah, then Passover came, but that's another story when Pastor John came to my house.
Oh, he came to your house?
Yeah. Very funny story.
So
Remind me later.
So when Pastor John came to your house, yeah, I'd be interested to hear that. But it's interesting to me that the instigator of your doubt and questions was coming from what is very common for most of the members I talk to, not necessarily coming, confronting issues with the doctrine per se, but some sort of bad relational experience that caused you to question the entire group, and then be willing, from whatever hurt or confusion that instance caused you, to then go and be willing to dive into this a bit and ask questions. So it's just interesting that it once again, it's the behavior that the WMS culture kind of propagates, and its leaders especially, and how this culture causes the leaders to respond and treat those subordinate to them. That very often is a catalyst for people to begin to doubt. And so, yeah, just another example of why the WMS, hopefully, those that watch this, if nothing else happens from these videos, if it causes them to change their culture to where at least people inside the organization are treated better, that itself would be, not the ultimate goal, but that would be a positive result, I think, of videos like this. Because as you can see from Ron and others, the way you guys treat people, it has repercussions.
Good point, Jordan.
And one thing I want to ask too, Ron, is that because Jordan Young, you knew Jordan Young, right?
Since he was a little man, yeah.
Yeah, since he was a kid, he was in the church, and
him and his brother Josh, yeah.
Oh yeah. So
yeah.
He would mention that he's mentioned in his videos that, like, early on in the church, it was he would describe a very different atmosphere than what members would experience today. He mentioned, like, going over to Diane Sims' house for pool parties. The pastor would come to that too. Like, did you see, like, that kind of atmosphere? And then how did it change over time during your span?
So let me spend a couple of minutes on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really important. I wanted to really explain about this. So early on in the church, and when I tell people that I was in a cult, I explain to them the beginning process, because the beginning process is very important when they first got here. I believe that they were told, don't correct anybody. Don't, just everyone who comes, preach the gospel to them, preach them, and don't say anything. So there was the first pastor of the church, the first pastor that was sent down here, his name was Joseph Kong. Have you ever heard of Joseph Kong?
He left, and then he got the church in trouble for using the evidence book.
Joseph Kong. Well, Joseph Kong, they had him and Cecil. She was called Deaconess Cecil. They were the first pastors, couple pastors that were there. He spoke no English. Okay. So John Lee was the one doing all the Bible studies. But Joseph Kong would do the sermons, and then we'd have the devices on for translation, because there was no English sermons at that time. It was only in Korean. And then we'd get the translation from one of the Korean women would do the translation. So when we first went to the church, we had birthday parties. I have pictures, and I believe I have a video of my nephew having a birthday party in the church with all the Koreans singing "Happy Birthday to you" to Andrew, my nephew Andrew. It was right in the church kitchen. We played basketball. Joseph Kong was a really, really good basketball player, and he loved basketball. We had a basketball court in Sunland in the church. We had an actual court, and we would play basketball every Saturday. And actually, Joseph Kong, sometimes we'd be running late for service because he wanted to still keep playing.
You guys would be late for service because of basketball, because the pastor wanted
on the church grounds.
The members, I want people to because that would never happen today.
I know.
I wasn't even a member. But even from what I'm familiar with again the culture of the WMS, that to me is shocking. It's like, this is the World Mission Society Church of God? Like, they don't do that sort of thing. They don't do pool parties. They don't do birthday parties. They don't do that sort of thing. So this sounds like this isn't even the WMSCOG that you're describing.
They don't anymore, because what I realized was the current situation was their original plan. The former situation was because they had no members here. You can't put restrictions if you're trying to just gain numbers. So your first plan is to gain numbers, and then you can start molding minds, but you got to have people to mold in order to mold something. So you need the people. So they were really, really lenient. But Joseph Kong, I got to tell this story because I think it's really, really important.
Yeah.
So we used to, we'd play basketball. We had a shower in the men's bathroom. So we would all be showering and changing and running into service, on the Sabbath day. And then right after service, all the guys would be back out playing basketball. The kids would be playing we had a playground with a swing and everything. The kids, I had my two daughters grew up in the church, and they had so much fun. It was really a lot of fun. We ate together. We laughed together. We joked together. It wasn't always Bible studies in between. There was a lot of talking, conversation about, each other. And then that changed. Joseph Kong, at some point, Joseph Kong went back to Korea. I had been to Korea once at this time. And then I had come back from Korea, and then several months went by, and Joseph Kong went to Korea. And then about 2 or 3 weeks went by, and he never came back. Wow. And Pastor Daniel Park, came. That's when he came to the Sunland Church and took over as pastor. And we were told that, strangely, because I was called the same thing, that Joseph Kong was like a Judas Iscariot. He didn't listen to Mother. He was stealing money from the church. And we all questioned and said, well, didn't Mother know that? Why didn't she just get rid of him? Mm-hmm. And they said, because Mother's compassion. Mother gave him so many times, so many chances, and told him come back to Korea, but he refused to because he didn't want to be corrected. So now he's away from God's grace. I wanted to explain this story because I went to Korea a little while after that, maybe 4 or 5 months. Me and my sister Tammy, we were me, her, and maybe 3 other people who were. I think there was Deacon Willie at the time, Tim. A few of us early day members who were very close to Joseph Kong. I love Joseph Kong, and I love Cecil too, his wife. They were very, very, comfortable, very friendly. So that we were called out to Korea. So we went out, only about 5 of us, because I guess we didn't know it at the time, but Mother wanted to explain the situation about Joseph Kong. So when we get out there, and this is going to get very weird, but this is the absolute truth. What happened on the Bible. My sister Tammy was very headstrong. One thing about her, she was headstrong, and she loved Cecil. So we were in Korea, and we hadn't seen anybody there. We had a conversation. Hold on 1 second. Someone to not call back. We had a conversation with General Pastor. And he brought us, I remember it was late at night. It was around 10 o'clock at night. And all of us were called from our rooms, and we went upstairs in Jerusalem Temple somewhere. And he explained to us with a few other few other leaders, the other head guys, head pastors. And we were explained about Joseph Kong and the situation, and to not lose our faith. but he's not going to be coming back. Mother gave him many chances, and we explained all that. So the next day, we were walking in Jerusalem Temple with a couple of pastors, and there's a kitchen area. And we saw my sister Tammy saw Cecil in there walking out. So Cecil saw us, and she started like almost shaking. And one of the pastors brought her back inside, and then me and my sister Tammy walked back inside. Even though the pastor was telling us, wait, we said, no, that was Cecil. We know her. We went back inside, and Cecil started hugging us and saying, I love you, I love you. And she was physically shaking. And then from nowhere, Mother came out from the back room and took her and shuffled her back into the back room. And that's the last we saw of Cecil. But we just remember she was shaking. So Cecil stayed in the church. Joseph Kong was outside of the church. So I believe
Cecil married to
Joseph Kong.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So we believe that she stayed with the church because they were probably an arranged marriage. And after Joseph Kong was thrown out, she just stayed in. But they were probably an arranged marriage also. That was a prelude to the arranged marriages in the United States. That had been going on in Korea, I'm sure, for a long time.
Right.
Wow. But yeah, that was it was a very strange story. Me and my sister went back to our rooms, and we had chatted about that for a bit, and we were a little uncomfortable with that, for sure. Both of us were a little uncomfortable.
Wow.
So what, obviously you weren't in that back room, but what in your conversations, I guess, what were you kind of suspecting took place with Cecil when they took her back there?
We didn't know. We just knew that she was shuffled off quick before we could have any conversation with her. And that was the part that disturbed us. And my sister Tammy, even though it was Mother pulling her away, my sister Tammy was like, wait, I want to talk to her. And she was just saying, I love you, as she was walking away. It was very strange.
That is very odd. Well, this is sort of an off-road here for a minute, but I'm just curious, kind of as an outsider from all this, just hearing you describe this situation where you're in the same room as Mother and having some sort of interactions with her. I guess a lot of people that have never been in this group, kind of as Kelsey, as you said in the intro of the documentary that I just put out recently, it's hard for them to grasp how people can become convinced that a South Korean woman is God the Mother. And so I guess just like what can you recall, like just anecdotally, like your perception back then when you're standing in this same room with this woman who you believe is God? I mean, what kind of thoughts are going through your head? Are there doubts? Are there things like, is this really God, or is she, because obviously now looking back on it, you're able to realize you were interacting with a fully flesh and blood human, no different than you. But then I guess, like, as a member who encounters her, what's that like? And I guess what's kind of some of the thoughts that might go through your head in that situation where you're right there with her in front of you?
Well, it's funny because a lot of members, after they came back from Korea, they, including myself, explained these amazing feelings that they had and these stories, and that never happened. It just simply never happened. You're taken by the moment, to be quite honest. You're taken by the moment. You're shuffled along. Everything is shuffled along, and everyone else is feeling a certain way, or that you perceive as feeling a certain way. So you act a certain way based on what you think should be how you're acting in the presence of someone to this magnitude.
Yes. And then that probably kind of tells you that you are feeling that way. So in a sense, you're convincing yourself that you are feeling the way you ought to be feeling, when in reality, you're not.
That's absolutely it, Jordan. That's the nail on the head, because you're so taken by the moment, and she comes walking in, and the buildup of mother's coming, and then the so many people who the first time I went to Korea, there was mobs of people wherever I was walking on the grounds. There was mobs of people coming out from nowhere, being like, "Oh, Omani, Omani." You felt like you didn't know they were part of the compound. You didn't know they were part of church, but you thought they were just people who just had known that she's God all along, and you're just finding this out. So it's kind of that kind of feeling like, wow, I'm really, really lucky. I can't even believe that I ran into this.
Yeah. I would imagine that, I would imagine some people do meet Mother and have special feelings or some kind of emotional experience that they identify as some kind of spiritual confirmation that this is true. But I would guess that the sort of things that people do experience would be very similar, if not exactly the same sort of emotional experiences one might have if for example, you're a big Taylor Swift fan and you go to a Taylor Swift concert, or beyond that, what if you get to go backstage and meet Taylor Swift? I guarantee you're going to be caught up and swept up in feelings that you've never felt before. Does that mean that Taylor Swift is, Mother God? Well, obviously not. And so I think that's just one of those things that I think people can mistake, unique feelings or emotional experiences as somehow being confirmation of the truthfulness of that thing. And that's just, as we know from the fact that so many other religious groups out there have their own unique, pointers. They point to their, like the Mormons, you'll have the burning in the bosom, and that will confirm to you that this is true. And I think Islam might have something similar to that. I'm not super familiar with Islam, so don't take that to the bank or anything. But I just think it's these things are the same. It's just it's an experience. You're in many ways, for the member, you're meeting a celebrity. You're meeting somebody who's just been propped up that you have never seen before, but you've certainly seen photos, and she's been talked up and elevated to this level. So of course, then when you actually are there and you see her come into the room, you're going to have oh my, this is a big moment. But in reality, nothing about that is an indicator of her being God or anything of that nature.
Yeah, and you create, you tend to create your own miracles. I don't know if that makes sense, but there was one time when I was there for my first month. I was the first American to go to Korea.
Did you say first month? Like you were there for a month?
I was there for a month. I went to go train to teach the Bible. That was when Elohim Academy wasn't even open. They were still building the buildings.
Oh wow!
The buildings that house members now. Those weren't even built yet. So
wow.
I stayed with a family in Seoul. I stayed with, I think, Pastor Park and a few other people, not Daniel Park, another Park there. But
was it the one married to Ellen Park?
No, it's Pastor John?
Yeah, Pastor
Lee?
John Lee. Yeah.
You know his wife Judy, Deaconess Judy, she's called. It was her father.
Isn't he the one that plays
Jonah
on
Park.
in all the recreations?
Jonah Park, yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Because okay, so her father played. So Jordan, you wouldn't know this, but there's like this infamous video in the Church of God where it's like a reenactment of. It's called Father's Great Sacrifice. It's like this man playing on, sacrificing, carrying,
walking up the mountain.
The guy who plays on is the guy that Ron stayed with, which is crazy to me because we're thinking like, he's the only visual representation that most of us had of On for the longest time. So that I can only imagine what that must have felt like, staying with the guy who looks like On for a month.
And he was I'm not 100% sure it was him, but I'm almost certain it is Jonah Park. It's Judy's dad for sure. And I do remember that video though, Kelsey. I think it is him. But Pastor Park was Judy was supposed to be one of the first ones baptized by Ahnsahnghong as a baby. And her father was one of the first followers of Ahnsahnghong. So
yeah. And also I want to point out too, Ron, because when you went to Korea, they filmed it and they made us watch the video. I mean, even like again, 2007 all the way till like you left, right? Because they weren't showing your video after you left. we watched that video. We would show that video to new members. It was part of the Like Clouds, Like Doves series. And when you went to Korea, like when I went in 2008, 2009, there were at least 100 people. And I know as the years went on, it probably grew up to like 200 people going at a time. But when you went, like how many members were there when you went?
No, I went by myself.
Oh, you went by yourself. So you got one-on-one time.
I got one-on-one. I went for a month. I was like the first Elohim Academy member when there was no buildings to house people. They were still in the making of that and planning that.
Yeah.
So I went and stayed for a month to learn how to preach the Bible studies. So every day I woke up. It was like boot camp. I woke up and I would always be with Jonah Park, Judy's dad, and he would teach me the Bible studies like in detail, and he would make sure that I explained them exactly right. And he would ask me questions and the challenging questions, and I would have to answer them. And so it was a pretty intense training for a month. And that's where he showed me for the first time. Jonah Park said, he told me to look at the scripture, read it, and tell me what it means. And it was a scripture where Jesus said, be as sneaky as snakes and as innocent as doves. So he told me, so what does that mean to you? And I said, I'm not sure. I said, and it appears that Jesus is saying to lie. So Jonah would say, is Jesus saying to lie to people? Like, isn't that the snake's characteristic? He's a liar. So is Jesus saying to lie to people? So I contemplate, he told me to think about that night. And then the next day he explained it to me that Jesus was saying, it's okay to lie a little bit as long as you're as innocent as a dove. Your intentions are innocent, which was strange to me, but.
I mean, we know that's, even a lot of the people from the East Coast
kind of
because they have like a certain term for it, like being able, I forgot what it's called, but I don't know if it's like holy lie or something like that. But
righteous lie, maybe.
Yeah,
righteous
like
lie,
basically what you just described.
Yeah,
as long as your intentions are good.
Yeah, and that's why I think that's why they got members to, not worry about telling people about Ahnsahnghong. Just a little lie, but your intention is good because you're trying to lead them to salvation. So.
Wow.
It's a bit of a slippery slope there. Well, let's maybe go back to you're kind of transitioning out of the church. I'm interested to hear more about kind of what that experience was like. And then for, again, possible current members who might watch this, just to be able to hear some of the things that you encountered when you finally got to that point of being willing to go online and actually ask the questions, which I'm, even just that. I mean, what sort of emotions were you feeling even with that? Because it sounds like when you decided to go to the internet, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you hadn't necessarily been having like a long stretch of doubt and struggle. It sounds like that situation with the pastor was a like a big catalyst to drive you to that. Would you say, is that correct? Was that, or had you been having doubts previous to that?
Yeah, I had been having doubts, Jordan, for sure.
Okay.
There had been several things that were going on. So there was Justin. I don't know if you know Justin, Kelsey.
Married to Annie.
Annie. Them two are, boy, they're a couple. Very, very, very strict. So Justin came back from Korea, and Enoch. I don't know if you know Enoch too. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm sure you do. So Justin came back from Korea. Oh, he was baptized here. He was an American. Him and Annie were American. Well, they were living here.
Well, he was American. But they met before the church, and then they both came into the church. But he grew up in Korea. I think came here in high school.
That's right.
I heard he got the name Justin. This is what I heard from Melvin and Alex, is that he got the name Justin because she suggested that name based off of Justin Timberlake.
That Annie suggested that name?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
He came in as they came in as Justin and Annie.
Because I remember. Yeah. Like she suggested that because that's not his biological name. Justin's not it's his English name.
Yeah, but he probably got that before he came to the church for sure.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Justin and Annie, when they came, they were actually very worldly. I think Annie even smoked cigarettes, and they were really worldly.
Yeah, they did.
And Annie. It took them a long time actually to be converted over. They were very skeptical, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Justin. So Justin was put in charge of the youth members. This is around 2010, and I had started seeing things changing. There was a lot of instructions to the youth that that didn't match up with the instructions that I've always known with the church, and that's when I started seeing the change. So there was some members. I don't know if you know Frank, Big Frank, curly hair. I'm sure you do. But they had moved to another area. A bunch of youth were asked if they wanted to go to another area to preach. So they always send youth members out in different areas. So the youth that went to a certain area, they had called me on a Sabbath day, and it had to do with one of the members was concerned. He had been matched up with somebody. He had been,
Arranged.
matched up with, arranged marriage with a Korean. And the Korean was telling him, strangely, the Korean was saying that it's okay to have sex. But he was saying that you're not supposed to. We're not supposed to do that when we get together like this. We're just put together to preach the gospel.
Right.
So they had called me because this one brother at the time was very distraught. He thought she was trying to lead him astray. She thought he was maybe testing him because she was Korean and he was American.
Right.
So they had called me on the Sabbath. One of the youth members brought the phone to me, and I talked to him, and I said, no, I said, I've never been taught that. I said, that's not true. I said, if you're married to somebody, you can do all the marital things. That's biblical. So I went to Pastor John and talked to him about that. I said, one of the members called me and said that Justin that was teaching about this, to the youth members. And Pastor John said, oh, missionary, just let Justin handle the youth. You take care of the adult men. And that's when it started clicking. And I said, oh, there's another teaching going on. And it happens to be to the younger members, because the younger members were always the main focus. Those were the ones that were going to carry out the last mission. They have the strength, they have the vigor, they have the energy, they have, the passion. So really hardcore people were put in charge of those groups to train them the right way.
And do you think maybe one of the, because I heard from some people too that some folks were taught, like, when you were put into an arranged marriage, no sex. But do you think perhaps, like, maybe one of the reasons why that was a rule for some of the younger folks is because they didn't want these people having children?
I'm sure that had to do with it, because all of that was nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
If you're put with somebody, having sex, having children was nonsense. You're not put together with somebody to enjoy those things of the world. You're put together to go out as a team to go preach the gospel.
Right.
So people were in turmoil thinking, I'm not supposed to be doing this. And, I don't think anyone knew the first marriages that were put together, there was one brother named Justin there. And I remember his face. To this day, I can remember his face. He was in such turmoil. He had a young son. The mom was not in the picture for the son, but he was put together with a Korean. When he went to Korea, he came back. He talked to me about it, and I said, Justin, I said, if you want to, I said, that's fine, So he was sent. A Korean wife was sent for him, and they had the worst relationship ever. They couldn't communicate together. He didn't know Korean, and she didn't know English. Mm-hmm. So whenever they had friction at the house, which was often, I remember I'm talking too much. Whenever they had friction at the house, Justin would get with me, and then Judy, John's wife, would get together, and all four of us would sit at a table, and we would counsel them, and Judy would translate for his wife on how she's feeling. And then Justin would tell me, we'd talk, he would say, this is how he's feeling. And then it was the weirdest thing, but he was frustrated because she was treating his son like garbage. That was his big issue. And I think he's still in the church, and I think that they broke him with that because she was telling him, you love your child too much. It gets in the way of the gospel. And
Wow.
Strange. Yeah.
You love your child too much is getting in the way of recruiting for the church.
That was the translation by Judy, that her issue was that he's too focused on his child, and he babies him and he does too much for him. And he's just a regular spirit like us, and he needs to understand that he's a sinner.
How old was the child?
Probably like 7, 8.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and Justin was a good man too. He was a very good man when he came to church. He was a very good man.
Wow.
Okay, so you had been having some doubts, noticing things that were causing you concern, and then you have this situation with the pastor who, like you said, pulls a bit of a mafia strong arm move on you, which kind of sent you a bit over the edge into a place of being willing to ask questions. So when you did get to that point of going to the internet, what were some of the things that you began to discover that ultimately led to you, saying, okay, this isn't the truth, and then obviously leaving?
The big one was the false mom, the false mother. That was the big one. Once we found out that, because that was
is that the Ahnsahnghong?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the false mother. When we found out about that, it kind of went hand in hand with a lot of other things, because there was on the Sunland Church, there was an A and a J in brick on the church. So we were told a story that when we purchased that church and they cleared all the leaves from it and everything, and the vines that grew up the building, that A and J was there. And then later it came out that one of the pastors that came, I think it was Daniel Park, he was like, no, they put that in there, A and J. So along with that, some of the lies that we found out, and then finding out about that there was already a mother that we had never studied about. I mean, that should be, for me, that should be, hey, let me explain something just in case, I want to explain the fact about the true mother, but I need to explain along with that there was a false mother. That would be fair.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way you're supposed to do things, I believe, as I understand it now, that you're supposed to explain the entire story. Like, this is a true mother, but there was a false mother. And here's why. There's prophecy. Just like the true mother had all the prophecies, supposedly, but the false mother, no prophecies about that. It's very strange to me. That ended up being very strange.
And how did you feel when because I'm sure, finding out about Ahnsahnghong, you also probably found out about the book that Ahnsahnghong had written, where he explicitly said that the Jerusalem is not a woman. He made it very clear that there is no female image of God. So how did you feel when you first heard that?
Well, so after I found out about that, I had Pastor John had been calling me. Other members were calling me. So Pastor John had been calling me. And then Mother wanted to talk to me, and she had called me once also. But Pastor John said he can explain it. And even Mother over the phone said, oh, I can explain it all. I can explain it. They're lying. So Pastor John, the final straw was Pastor John said that Mother wants him to explain. He wanted to come over to my house. So he came over, and my wife wouldn't come into the garage. She didn't want him in the house. And she said, you guys can go in the garage. So he said, I need to explain something to you about this about this mother. So he came into the garage and he opened up his laptop, and I'll never forget it. He put on a cartoon. He put on a cartoon to explain to me about how this false mother stole the book, found out about her, stole Father's book, found out, and proclaimed herself as a false mother. And I remember sitting there as a grown man with another grown man on the side of me, watching a cartoon in my garage, and I could not wait until it had ended so that I could say thank you very much, and let's do it again next Saturday. Looney Tunes, though, this time.
Oh my God.
So just to clarify for those that I'm assuming most people that watch this will be familiar with this book we're talking about, but just for those who aren't, there is a book written by Ahnsahnghong called Problems with the New Jerusalem, the Bride, and Women's Veils, which as I usually try to do, I'll try to remember to link in the video description of this interview, a link to that book where you can read it yourself. You can read Ahnsahnghong's own words that he wrote, where he basically he'll even specifically take passages from like Revelation 22, Galatians 4, and he'll say this woman says that this verse is teaching that there is a female deity and that female deity is herself. And then he'll say, but this is what Galatians 4 actually means, and it has nothing to do with God the Mother. And he'll do the same with Revelation. He'll say the bride in Revelation, the wife of the Lamb, is the saints. He says it over and over. He reiterates that. And not only in this book, but in some of Ahnsahnghong's truth books, he will also teach that he's consistent. He'll teach that the bride, the wife of the Lamb, is the saints. And so this obviously, as a WMS member, first hearing about this book and encountering that, wait a minute, you're telling me that Ahnsahnghong wrote an entire book in which much of it was devoted to refuting this idea that there is a mother God. And he actually uses the very same Bible verses that we use to teach mother God. He uses those verses and specifically says these have nothing to do with mother God. Let me explain what they actually have to do with. So yeah, just for those who aren't familiar, that's what we're talking about. That's some of the information that Ron encountered that I think began to cause him to ask some very valid questions.
And one of the things, Jordan, that's exactly right. And one of the things that we questioned a lot with Pastor John also, we questioned a lot because we said, okay, maybe that might make sense, but we didn't understand why publish a book. Why not at that time just explain? Ahnsahnghong had a very small church at that time, according to what we've always known. So why not? He had 3 locations, I think, of very small members in 3 different locations, why not just explain to them? Mm-hmm. And then she's out of the church, you explain to them and it's resolved. But we had come to the conclusion that he wrote a book and published it because it wasn't just for them. It was for any time anyone says that, don't believe it.
Yeah, which is what he says in the preface of the book when he says the things I'm about to write are the unchanging truth of God. But yeah, I mean, why does a person write a book? You don't write you write a book because you're hoping that it's going to have some longevity and it's going to reach future people once you're gone and can no longer relay that information. If all he needed to do was to dismiss this one woman in this one instance, and then later on had planned that, in the near future, mother will be revealed. It will be revealed that these Bible verses actually do reveal a female deity. Why write a book about it? That's going to remain until this day, so that now you have us here talking about it, saying, look at what he said about it. It just seems like a pretty silly choice on Ahnsahnghong's part if he actually believed in the existence of Mother God, which obviously he did not. He
did not.
And it's like when when you work for a company too, if you want to confirm something, you always put it in writing.
That's right.
Like if I'm like, for example, I'm because if I'm trying to say like, oh, my boss gave a decision and I'm trying to tell somebody, but I don't want it written down. Right. I don't want it to be like, I don't want my words to be misconstrued later on. Yeah. Then I'll tell them verbally. Right. But if I want to put it in writing, like this is fact, this is the unchanging fact, I'm putting it in writing. Right. Mm-hmm. So the fact that like you mentioned, like he put it in, not only did he publish it once, I don't know if you knew this, Ron, he published that book twice.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He published it twice.
Wow.
And so in the early 80s. So it's like, and there's no evidence that the church made any effort. I mean, Ahnsahnghong made any effort to retrieve those books.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's very clear, like he meant this is what I believe, guys.
That's correct. Mm-hmm. That was his teaching, 100%, and they can't get around that. That was his teaching. That was the second coming Christ teaching, was that there is no mother God. Mother represents the church. So hard to get around.
And I want to say something too, because like, again, Ron, when you left, like, it was such a big deal in the church when you left. And not only when you left, but when you made that video with Steve Hassan, it had such an effect, because a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, you know, Ahnsahnghong writing the book, and even stuff that you mentioned in your interview with Steve Hassan about, you know, hearing for the first time that Ahnsahnghong had kids, that he was in the Seventh-day Adventist church. Like, these things, me as a member, I didn't learn those things until you had made that video, and then the church had a seminar, a couple of seminars all throughout the U.S., one of which being in L.A., and they pulled up your video, spliced it, of course, and said, like, said all these things. Like, they said, yes, it's true, Ahnsahnghong had kids, so what? It was
They had to explain at that point. They had to explain at that point.
I, as a member, because at that time it was probably, I think it was early 2013, I had been a member for 6 years at that point, and I had never heard that Ahnsahnghong had kids. We were singing songs about him being alone for 37 years, right?
Yeah.
When I went to the Elohim Academy, they have a replica of his house. There's no way a family of 6 could have lived in that house. It was like, it was like a one room kind of thing, and I'm short and I could touch the ceiling. Okay.
Right.
So if that says anything, like, there's no way, and there's no electricity, no running water, you know, we weren't taught these things about. I wouldn't have cared if he had kids, but it was the fact that they hid it from us. And the only reason they told us is because Michelle coming out with the examining site, and especially from us on the West Coast, your video mentioning these things, that the members nowadays know about it.
Yeah.
So if you hadn't made that video, who knows if members would have known about it.
Yeah. And I think to be honest, I definitely, I don't want to say I had a lot of people who trusted in me, because John still had broken English. So I was really the first one that was able to explain it clearly, 100% clearly in English. And it was refreshing to people. And then I started doing sermons in English. So it was kind of refreshing. So when I left, I think they maybe overreacted a bit. There was some steam and everything. But I think if they would have just not reacted, the steam might have went away. And I think their reaction caused even a more explosive situation. So in a sense, they kind of overreacted, which was good for all of us. It was good for, people getting out.
When you had left, I was in Portland, and there were members from LA that were in Portland. And I remember picking up, you probably know her, Rachel, the Korean sister, Rachel. I picked her up for the Sabbath day. And when I picked her up, she was
in charge of the kids, and she was mean to the kids. She was mean. She was mean.
She put kids in a corner for 45 minutes and forget about them. It was mean. Like, the kids weren't afraid of the pastor. You just say, "Do you want me to get Sister Rachel?" And they just
yeah.
But no, I picked her up, and because she came from Korea, but she was in LA for a long time, and she told me, she's like, I just got a call from Pastor Ron and Diane are on the side of Satan now, and we're not allowed to talk to them. And so members, the LA members, people who knew you guys, were being called one by one and told not to talk to you guys anymore. And so that's when I first heard about it. And then of course, like, when you did the video with Steve Hassan, they then took that video, spliced it up, and then tried to explain why each thing was like a lie or something like that. And that's when I heard what you would, but we heard a very edited version of what you said, obviously. But
and there was so many stories. Like, I talked to people in different churches who had came out, and they each had a different story. One of the stories was that I wanted power, and I wasn't a pastor, and I was frustrated because of that, which is so not my character. Like, I don't like leading anybody. I like actually listening and following. It's just not my character. But and then the other one was that that I was womanizing in the church and doing things like that. And it was like every story was just different depending on the church it came from.
Oh,
It was like
really?
3 or 4 different stories from different churches. Whatever they told them, they would just tell them. Whatever the pastor decided about me there, they would say that. But one of the things that they, John had done, I just want to share this real quick because it was a big one. It was a shaking. It was a shaking of a little bit of the church. I had brought somebody that I worked with. I worked with her, or my wife worked with her. I think my wife did. Chelsea was her name. She was Taiwanese, I think. She was born here, though. She had 2 kids, and she had come to church. She had got baptized. She kept one Passover, and then right around the second Passover, it was we had done her second Passover, and then it was the Ascension Day. We were out at a park, and my sister, we were waiting for. Oh, her name was Sharon. I'm sorry, Sharon. We were waiting for Sharon to get there because my sister was in charge of, helping her along and making sure that she got to sermons and that she got, she was her keeper. So Sharon had never gotten there, and my sister Tammy got a phone call that she had died. She was ran over by a bus in L.A.
Wow.
And yeah, we were all shocked. And my sister came over to me right away and said, "You're not going to believe that Sharon is dead. She was hit by a bus." And we were like, "That's impossible. She took the Passover." Because we thought at that time, physically, you couldn't die.
Because that's what we were told initially.
Oh,
yeah.
Physically. I remember when I was on the plane with John going to Korea the first time, he was saying how protected this plane is because nothing can happen to anyone here because we're on it. So when that happened, me and Tammy went to Pastor, and we said, "Pastor John," we said, "Sharon's died from a bus accident." And I will be honest, Pastor John seemed legitimately surprised. And he said, "No, that's impossible." He said, "No, really?" And he said, and we said, "Yeah, she died." And then immediately, within the next couple of minutes, he called us back over and he said, "Did she take the Passover?" And my sister Tammy said, "Yes, she did." And he said, "No, I don't think she took it. Did she really eat it?" And my sister Tammy said, "Pastor John, she ate." I watched her. I was on the side of her. She ate the bread and drank the wine. And he said, "No, I don't think so. It's impossible. She didn't do it." And then he started going around to other people and mentioning, because other people started catching wind of it. And he started going around and saying, and we were finding out that he was saying she didn't keep the Passover. She didn't physically take the bread and wine. So he was already spreading the story about her death. And then after
she
that,
died.
yeah. And then after that, Deacon, I don't know if you remember Turk. Do you know Turk or June? Deaconess
I've heard
Turk?
the name, but I don't think I knew them, but I heard the name Turk for sure.
Yeah, she died of a brain aneurysm or something very unexpectedly.
Yes,
She had
I
a
did hear
son.
about, yes.
Yeah, she had a son, Serticon, and I did the sermon for her short. We did a small funeral for her only because her husband wasn't really a full believer. He was baptized, but not a full believer. And Pastor John said, "Okay, do the sermon, but make it short because we don't really do this kind of stuff." And that was another one.
But they said on their tax forms they do.
Oh yeah, no, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't do that. Yeah, they don't do that. But he tried to explain away hers too, and that was the second one. And that's when a lot of us were like, "We're not supposed to die physically. Now there's 2 deaths. What's going on?" So a lot of things like that were happening.
Wow.
It's interesting to me that was such a clear teaching in the church early on, that you wouldn't die physically, that it would cause that as the pastor's response, that he would have to go and just blatantly lie and just say, "Oh, well, these people didn't keep the Passover," or whatever his explanation was for the second person. But so did that, at what point were you still there in the church when that began to change? Did you begin to see that teaching kind of let up a little bit? Because I know now, obviously, one thing we emphasized recently was COVID, and how they would, I think at first, at the beginning stages of COVID, they're kind of propagating, at least members were on Facebook, to come to Zion, flee to Zion for safety. And then obviously members would die and they were affected the same way as others were. So I guess as time went on and deaths continued, because that's the natural course of life, and the church certainly can't protect you from that. How did you see that teaching change in the church?
Yes. Yes and no. Because not necessarily, because that was right before the 2012 when I got out, 2011. So we really did believe we were going home, that, this was 2012 was going to be it. I remember Daniel Park, probably around 2009, 8 or 9, had went to Korea, and he preached on the pulpit that he had to, when he got back, he said he had to go get his visa renewed. And he said that his visa was for 5 years. This was like around 9. And he said that mother told him that his visa would be here longer than we would.
Wow.
So even 9, 10, 11, we were still believing that, 2012, we're out of here. So the teaching was pretty consistent then. I'm not sure how they got around, it just kind of hush hush. You just don't talk about it, as far as Turk dying and Sharon dying. You just don't talk about it much, and it just kind of gets brushed under the rug, and then you just move on, type of thing. At that time there was a lot of churches, and you don't communicate with other churches. So what happens in one would never get to another one. That would be unheard of, that you don't talk about other churches. Although I visited so many churches, because I lived on, I used to live on the East Coast, so I would go to visit, what's his name? Daniel
Lee.
in New York. Yeah, I would go and visit him. He actually baptized my sister and brother when I was down here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He drove to Rhode Island to baptize them.
Wow.
He's a character.
Yeah, he's a character. He's strict. Whenever I went to his church, it was like military style. And anyone who came from his church that branched out to like Connecticut or whatever, they ran the same exact way. We would be eating, and it was like everyone was waiting for the leader to talk. And it was like, how come no one's just talking around here and enjoying themselves? It was very strict. He was strict.
We've heard about, you went to the internet, you started to find various pieces of evidence that you hadn't heard before. It sounds like some of that included information about Ahnsahnghong's physical life, him having a marriage, having kids. So I guess what was kind of the sticking point? What was the point where you said, okay, this is obviously not the truth, and then left? And I guess what was that? And then, like, what was that experience like?
Yeah. So yeah, it was after that cartoon thing. And then after that, John did come to the house. He said, would you keep the Passover? And he did come in my garage. I did do the Passover that last year, 2011, April of 2011. And then after that, mother had called a couple of times. I think I heard one recording. Someone recorded mother on one of the websites.
Diane.
And it was the same. Yeah, it was the same thing. I love you. They're lying. Come to Korea. I'll pay. Same exact conversation. And then that was it. I mean, once we found out what we found out, and there was no solid explanation, Jordan. That was the problem. The problem was there was no solid explanation that made it clear. Because I believe that if you can get a member away and you can show them that evidence with no explanation to it, I think that's the key. And I think a break from the church and then seeing the evidence is even, that's what solidified it for me. I needed a break. I took a break. It was a couple of months that had went by. I did do the Passover. I wasn't passionate about it, but I said, okay, because I had fear still that, we're getting close to 2012, and maybe I'll do it now, and maybe I'll do it again in 2012, if we're not gone. But I ended up moving to Texas in 2011. And then I was done completely. But strangely, I was going to a little corner store from my house in Texas, and it's walking distance from my house. And there was a Church of God there, World Mission Society Church of God.
Wow.
which made me think, wow, I'm supposed to go back. It messes with your mind.
Right.
Like, oh, wow, mother put a church right here to remind me so that I wouldn't be led astray, and I would come back to the church, and
Mm.
and I saw some people there. I went in the parking lot one time, and strangely, they knew me, even in a different car. They started walking over to me in the car, and it was Sam. I don't know if you know Sam and
Becky.
yeah, Sam and Becky, and then a few other of the youth members. They came walking over to me, and it was so funny because they were like a robot. They were like, "Hi, can we help you?" And it's like, I baptized you, and I was teaching you for years. You came to me with
Yeah,
every
he came from
situation.
LA.
He was from LA, yeah.
LA. Yeah.
He came from LA to Texas. He was in Texas with a few other youth members that I had a relationship like this with. You know, I was
Yeah.
like their big brother. And hi, can we help you? And I just looked, I said, Sam, I said, come on. I said, hi, how are you, Sam? It's me. I'm not here, you know, to make any trouble for you guys. I just thought it was strange that the church was here. He's like, oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. And I was just like, wow. I said, Sam, you are so brainwashed, man. This was a little after in 2011. I think I had already met with Steve, so they kind of knew.
Okay.
Yeah, because I had already done the video with Steve. It was probably about 4 or 5 months after I got out, and before moving to Texas, I did the video with Steve, and then we had went to. I went with him to try to get a member out. So we had went and protested a church over in I think it was San Diego or somewhere in the in California area. That was the moment that I was just like, I mean, even before I moved to Texas, I was done. You know, I had talked and I had talked to Steve, and Steve was a good resource for me understanding a little bit more. Working with Steve, then I kind of started understanding about cults and how they work, hearing his story, you know, with the Moonies and how passionate he was, and he believed 100%, you know. So it was kind of a parlay of things that made me. But for a while, to be honest, even around 2012, for a while, I was nervous. I had made the wrong decision, and I spent all those years.
Mm-hmm.
And right at the end, I fell away because you know you learn about that stuff. You know,
Yeah.
you know, don't fall away at the last hour. You know.
Yeah. So you're mentioning doing a video with Steve, and so for those of you who aren't familiar with who Steve is, he's referring to Steve Hassan, who is a cult expert, a former member of the Unification Church, and now he's developed a model for high demand, high control groups called the BITE model, which again, something that a lot of you guys will be familiar with watching this. But Kelsey, I think you had maybe some questions about Ron's video that he did with Steve.
Yeah, I mean, because again, like I don't know how to emphasize enough, like the impact that video had on the church. Like, I mean, because you were very well known in the church. I didn't even meet you, but I knew who you were when you were still a member. And so when you left, I remember them talking about, oh, you guys are on the side of Satan, and then I think I had like randomly Googled World Mission Society Church of God on YouTube, or not Google, but searched it on YouTube, and that video that you did with Steve Hassan popped up. And I remember at that time as a member watching it, which you're not supposed to do, but I watched it, and I remember the anger that I felt when I watched that video, because they had really put it in our minds that you were so evil. And not only that, but I was told that you were paid by a Korean Babylon church to do that interview with Steve Hassan.
Oh wow!
Like, yeah, I know. I was told by for those listening, I was told by Sister Rachel that you were paid by a Korean Babylon church to do that. Now knowing, you know, after leaving, you know, people say I'm paid too to do these things. It's like, no, like who's supposed to be writing these checks? I don't know. I've never gotten one. But
you haven't been getting your royalty checks, Kelsey?
No.
Aren't you about to buy that new beach condo with all the money you've made from these videos? Yeah.
I know someone's
right.
late on the payments, let me tell you. But no, I remember watching it and watching your video, and then I know Diane also did an interview with Steve Hassan too. Like, but hers was like off the camera, but and I remember listening to hers and just having so much anger at you guys for telling your stories, and which are all true. But at the time, even though like a part of me knew the things that you were saying were true, my mind was also justifying it. Like, oh, the church says,
Yeah.
you know, the church teaches about, you know, like 2012 being the end, right? Like, I heard that with my own ears from Missionary Peter in Seattle. I
Yeah.
heard that teaching once, and then, but yet I was still so angry hearing you guys, hearing you say 2000, the church taught 2012 was the end. I'm like, well, they taught that because it's like, you know, they had a reason for it. And then, so I can't, I don't know how to, because I know a lot of people watching this, they probably joined the church within, you know, the last 3, 4, 5 years. And like
Yeah.
some of the members that we get commenting on these videos, they've only been in like that long. So they don't, I don't think they recognize the impact that this had. But one of the things the church did with that video, as I mentioned earlier, is they spliced it up and they cut it up in sections, and they would say, oh, he's lying at this point, and then they would show something to say that you're lying. Like when you mentioned, so but that's the thing, they splice it up, they show it to members. They did put it on YouTube for a time and then took it down, but but as a member, I saw it within the church. Like they have it on a DVD in the church, and a lot of times, like they I'm sure they do this with the Great Life Studios videos too, where they break it up, show members, and then tell their side of the story. And you know, us who are actually in the video and made it public don't get the chance to,
See
you
that?
know, respond. And so like some of the some of the points that you made in the video, one of which I remembered very clearly was you mentioned about racism in the church, and then the church would then, you know, stop at that point where you mentioned racism, and then they show a picture of you with Deacon Tyrone in
Tyrone,
Korea.
yeah.
Yeah, and say, oh, he's in Korea with you know, someone who's black. Or and then they would show like, oh, look it, we preach in Atlanta. Like, are we really, we're not racist. Like this guy's lying. Right. And one of the things that you mentioned in your video that really stuck with me is it's not always about what they say directly, but by what they but by their actions. So so I was like, I don't know if you want to do this, but some of the things that they said you lied about, I want to kind of give you the chance to respond back to what they say. So like with the racism one, when they say like, oh, you went to Korea with Deacon Tyrone, and you know, they preach in Atlanta, and they have churches in like, you know, Haiti and whatnot. What would you say to that today?
The way it was explained, I learned about that prophecy early on. It was about Noah's 3 sons,
Yeah.
and Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and each
Yeah.
one representing a certain region of the world now. I think Japheth was the European area, Shem was the Asian continent, and Canaan was or Ham was the African continent. And
Yeah.
Ham was going to be cursed throughout forever. So I remember learning that study. Me and my sister learned that study together. I'm actually Cape Verdean, Portuguese, and Italian. So Cape Verdean is we got African in us.
You got all of it.
Yeah. So when me and my sister Tim, I don't think they knew that because I kind of look white, you know, and my sister Tammy does too. So I remember learning that study. We had no black people in the church at the time. And I remember learning that study, and me and my sister Tammy walked away, and we were like, does mother know that we have some Africans? Are we going to be saved then?
Oh my God.
We literally had that conversation because we learned that study about how Ham is going to be cursed and can never enter the land of milk and honey, just like it represents heaven. They can never enter heaven. Later on, we preached to anybody, but I think it's the same scenario of playing basketball early days, you know, having birthdays in the church early days. The gospel has to be preached to everybody, so there's no real discrimination in that. But inwardly, I believe that they don't believe that group will make it. But yet they'll still preach to them because they want to show that they're preaching to the whole world. And that's what the prophecy states. So that's why they're doing that. But early days, that was the teaching. And if it came from Korea, it was taught to us in LA. And I know the members who all learned it with me, the early members, they all know it too. They'll still admit it to this day. They'll still be in the church, but they'll admit that they learned that, unless they're, you know, too far gone. But but yeah,
I
then
learned
afterward, Yeah.
I learned that study from Pastor John, because Pastor John would come to see. Both times I heard that I was in Seattle, and he would come to Seattle and do those bigger studies with us. And I
Yeah.
heard twice that study about Noah and his 3 sons. Yeah, the same. I don't remember which son represented which region, but I was told, one son represents the black people, one son represents the white people, and the other represents the. Well, they would say. I can't remember if it was Asian or Korean specifically, but I'm pretty sure it was Asian. And
I
they would
think
say
Asian.
yeah, they would say the black people are cursed and the white people are here to serve the Asians, is what
That's
they
right,
would
because
teach.
Japheth was Shem. Shem would be ruler over Japheth, and Japheth
Mm-hmm.
represented the European white Caucasian, and that's why they were the superior race, the Asian Korean race.
Yeah. And so I remember also the Elohist, like the magazines. There was an Elohist that I saw, and I was in Seattle when I saw this because I had a conversation with Alex, who's a deacon now. On the back of the Elohist, it said the N-word on it. And I remember having a conversation. Yeah,
Really?
yeah. I remember having a conversation with Alex, and Alex was saying, like, oh, like, the Koreans, they're so, he would say, even Pastor John, like, they're so racist, like, but he was making a joke out of it, saying,
Right.
oh, they're racist and they don't realize it. And then that was that. But I've never been able to find someone who has a copy of that, but it's from somewhere between 2009 and 2011. It's literally on the back. And so, and we were also told in Seattle to not preach to Hispanic people who couldn't speak English. We were told to put away, because we had people who could translate. We had Melvin, we had Alex, we had people who could translate, and we were told specifically to leave our Spanish Bibles at home. Do not, like, if like, we should be preaching in English to these people, even if they can't understand. And so,
and the church did start teaching about, because at some point, because we were in LA, we were only gathering a lot of Hispanic and ethnic people, and we were literally told during sermons, like, why are you so afraid to talk to white people who are affluent and wealthy? Those are the people we need. Those are the last remnant that we have to bring into the church. So
they would drop us off in wealthy neighborhoods to preach too.
Yeah,
I remember, and those people never listened.
And yeah, exactly right. And the second time I went to Korea, it was the first or second time. There was so many red flags, Jordan, to be honest. When you look back, there was so many red flags. But when I went to Korea, I got off a bus and there was mobs of people and they were like, "We love you, we love you." And I really felt like a movie star of some sort. I was like, why are all these people out here? I mean, now I know it was all organized and everything else. But they actually, what the pastor told me is, I said, why are they so excited to see me? And they said, because Mother said one day that the gospel, that kings and queens would come from the West and would bow down to her, and you're fulfilling that prophecy. And I remember one of the girls, there was a lot of young girls, they were like, we love you. And I remember one of them saying to me, oh, doctor, oh, you're a doctor. And I was trying to explain to her, because I'm an RN, I'm not a doctor. So I tried to explain to her that I was a nurse, and the pastor told me, oh, no, come on, don't worry, come on, over here. And I was like, oh, wow, I wonder if they're boosting me up to make it look like even the highest of high are coming to Korea to bow down to Mother. Very strange.
Well, I mean, they do that, because they have videos in the church called People of the Church of God, which I think came out after you left, and they would have members with, like, some, who members who worked with NASA, like the August Crusade guy.
That was their goal.
And Lisa from LA, because she worked for NASA.
I baptized her. I love Lisa and Jose. Lisa and Jose was such a great couple.
She was very nice. But like, they would have videos with them and people like them who had like these really great jobs, and they would have them say like, oh, I have these really great jobs, I'm successful, and I'm a member of this church. And but yeah, they really flaunted those people.
And they started shunning the first people, which was Willie, Tim, Javier, a couple of other families, because they really were. I mean, to be honest, I know why they elevated me and pushed me along. I was probably one of the first Americans that came to the church that spoke well, had a good career, had a good job, had a good ability. So right away they started elevating me, and that caused rift below because Timmy, Will, and all them who had been there longer, and they were being pushed aside, and there was a lot of controversy over that during that time. Very, very strange. Very strange.
So another thing that you mentioned that they said that you had lied about was abortions in the church. Can you, and also after, like you had mentioned that in your video, they came out with a series of videos that they put out on YouTube of, like, members with kids in the church. So it'd be like, a sister and a brother who are married. And I mean, like, not physical sister and brother, but like a female and a male who were married, and it would have their kids, and they'd be talking about how the church celebrates their family in the church. Like, that came out after. So, because you mentioned about abortions, and then you mentioned about the church not wanting people to have kids, because we're living in the last days and they should be preaching the gospel. So, do you have any response to that one?
Sure. Yeah, early days. So it all goes back to early days. So every video they showed was like early days, and everything was allowed early days. So whenever they showed something, it was prior to all of this strict teaching. But I guarantee if you did a census in the church, which we would never be able to do, members who were joined together for the gospel work I'm not getting pregnant and having kids. I promise you that. And people who have been in the church, and if they're together and they didn't have kids, they're not all of a sudden having kids and raising them up in the gospel, and because no one believes we're going to be here long enough. And they know that. They know that that was discouraged. They said, Pastor John told me there's nothing in the Bible that says God never addressed whether you can or can't. So it's fine to have an abortion. It was never addressed. And that's how, so whenever I would explain something that I didn't know to a member, if they came to me, and a lot of times they came to me because they were uncomfortable with some of the Korean members because of the communication thing. So when they did, I would go to Pastor John, or he was missionary at the time, and he would explain to me. So when I explained that, that's what it was explained to me, that abortions, you can have them. It's better to have one of them than to have a child, because the child gets in the way of the gospel. And it's the same story. Other members have even talked about that, and it's the same thing when I listen to it. It's the same exact story. It's about how could you devote all your time to the gospel if you have to devote most of your time to your child?
Right.
So yeah, that's just a given with them, because if you looked in the church, if you look at someone who's been there for 10 years and they're married to somebody, I promise you they don't have a child unless they came into the church with a child. So if there was a way to do a census, it would be clear.
Yeah. No, I agree, because from the whole time I was a member, from 2007 to 2017, leaders and people who were like arranged, they weren't having children. And I even saw the overseer in Seattle, who was the overseer for the longest time in Seattle before Pastor John came. They had a kid, and then next thing I know, they are being sent to California, and Pastor John comes in and he takes over Seattle. And so, and then like after that happened, I started hearing of like some leaders having kids, but not very many.
Right.
And I don't know if it was in, to be able to say like, hey, our leaders do have kids, like, but because I see like a lot of their stuff is like, we come out with a claim and then they try to prove that we are lying by suddenly saying, oh, like when you were a member, were you allowed to keep Thanksgiving? Were you allowed to go home and celebrate the dinner with your family?
Early days, yes.
Early days, but then as it became more strict, were you allowed to do that?
No, then we were taught that, that kind of stuff those are pagan holidays, and why would we
Right.
celebrate pagan holidays?
Yeah. Well, now they allow members to go home and celebrate Thanksgiving, and so
Yeah.
they're very reactionary.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Early days it wasn't a question, and then when they were teaching about it, then they would explain that these are pagan things. In other words, the longer you were there, back in the early days, you wouldn't get to hear about that until you had done X amount of studies.
Mm-hmm.
So even hearing about Ahnsahnghong, you had to be at a certain point before you could hear about his name. And chances are you were already baptized. You had to be baptized to hear about it.
Right.
But yeah, things change throughout the courses, throughout the course of time. But definitely, I remember talking to John. I remember talking to other leaders, and saying this one is pregnant, or that one's pregnant. And I remember being in the room, and even Pastor John going, "Oh, why would they do that? Why are they going to have a child when it takes away from the gospel?" So it's shunned. They can say what they want, but it's shunned upon.
But also, I saw because this was something that you mentioned in your video with Steve as well, is that kids, when they come to the church, like on the Sabbath day, like even like 1-year-old kids are expected to sit still and be quiet during services. They're not allowed to have toys. They're not allowed to have snacks, nothing to drink. They have to sit still and pay attention to the sermon. And I would see the mothers struggle so much to keep their kid like sitting still, because if the kid was disruptive, then it would look bad on the parents, because the parents aren't praying hard enough, or they don't have strong enough faith. That's why their kid is acting out. And so I mean, that was just, I mean, because I have a 2-year-old niece right now, and to think this child sitting down and listening to anything, even a movie she's seen 100 times, and just sit down and pay attention for even like 45 minutes to an hour, like that's impossible. How can you expect that to take place? But that's what they expect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And parents were in turmoil over that. That was one of the hardest things, because parents were such in turmoil, because they really did come in with an earnest heart to follow God, and their kids were just being kids, and they were really talked to a lot about how the kids used to be in the regular sanctuary when we moved from Sunland to LA. So in Sunland, everyone was together, kids and everyone.
Yeah.
And then in LA, when we moved to LA in Canoga Park, then we had more room there, and we built a separate sanctuary for the children, and they would go worship in there. And I just remember, especially in the sanctuary or even in the children's room, the parents just being so almost like hating their children, because you're ruining it for me, and the turmoil on their face when I look back now and I think about it. So sad, because they were being kids. There was a much more humane way of handling children who act up in service. You can walk out individually. It doesn't have to be pointed out, and you shouldn't have to feel like if you don't strictly enforce this with your child, then you're not going to be saved. You're not doing God's will, because the child is just a demon spirit like you. So don't treat it like just a little child. It's a spirit that needs to be saved. That was always the reasoning. Don't look at your child as a child. That's a spirit that needs to hear the word of God, needs to be fed. And it was just turmoil. I started seeing that get stricter too in the children's room. And my daughters, I have a 26-year-old and a 22-year-old now, and they were both very young. Tatiana was 2 years old when we first went to church, and then my youngest was like 5 or 6. And they tell me stories now that's unbelievable. They'll tell me, about how strict it was, and they kind of got special treatment, to be quite honest, because they were my kids. So they got away with a little bit more, but there was some of the regular members, their kids were, put in corners. They never did that to my kids, and I maybe because of just the hierarchy or whatever, but there was some kids, little Johnny, and Johnny was Jordan and Josh. Josh was always in trouble. Jordan. Jordan was always in trouble. Josh is the little brother. But good kids, just being kids, and then going through. I didn't realize it. My daughter's telling me now. We talked about it afterwards, and they're like, "Dad," and I was like, "It wasn't that bad. You guys had fun there." And they're like, "Dad, it was not fun. It was very strict." And Rachel was always like with the rule.
They had Rachel.
Yeah, they had Rachel. Rachel started being a teacher in Canoga Park in LA before she was sent out. Yeah, she was a teacher there, and she'd always, yeah.
Wow.
Very sad situation.
Did you ever witness? Oh, sorry, Jordan.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. I'm probably going to change that. So go ahead.
One more question on this that I have about the kids. Did you ever? What did you witness in regards to the church requiring fasting in children? What did you witness with that?
Well, they were a spirit. They needed to fast just like we did.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't. The church didn't look at little and big and old. It was whatever the spirit inside of that person was the same age spirit as the old person and the young person.
Mm-hmm.
And that spirit had to be saved and had to go through the same things, which means keeping the feast, fasting, doing everything that we did. So
tithing.
Yeah, fasting. Yeah, tithing. We used to put. I know. My daughters never worked, but I would put an envelope in for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, they as much as you could. Sometimes with the babies, they would say, well, if you ask, they would always say their way out was always, oh, it's up to you. But what does the Bible say? But it's up to you. Go ahead if you want. So naturally, if you want to be saved, you're gonna be like, okay, they need to fast too.
Yeah. One of the craziest things that I was taught concerning the babies is, because I don't know if you remember, but for the Secret of Forgiveness of Sin study, they used to use an example about like the wages of sin is death, right? And they would say like, sometimes a baby is born, right? And as soon as it's born, it dies, right? And then they would say, and I remember being taught I was taught by Deaconess Deborah that in that case, like, we look at children, especially babies, as so innocent, right? But we don't know the sin that they committed in heaven. And so sometimes God lets them die, but like as soon as they're born, before they are baptized, because they are the intentional sinners.
That's right.
And which means which intentional sinner, Jordan, means someone who will never enter heaven. And they tell that to people. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's creepy.
Yeah, that kind of gets near the borders of a discussion I've been having and pushing back against evangelical stream of doctrine. There's this idea called infant damnation that kind of there's some similarities there. I guess we'll just say that. And I think that any way you put that, when you are confronting parents who have lost a child, an infant, and your theological take on the situation is to tell them that God's perception of them either might be or very likely is that they were just not chosen, not elect, not or in this case that they had sinned to such a horrible extent in heaven that there's just no hope for them. I mean, I just can't imagine a more horrible thing to tell a parent in the context of a pastoring scenario where you should be coming and giving them comfort and hope, something to cling on to, being able to tell them about the infinite love of God. And if you love them as much as you do, how much more can you know that God who created both them and you, how much more does he love them? And just, it's just a horrible thing that people have to experience that sort of teaching in a time where they need comfort and encouragement more than any other time. And yet they're given, rather than being lifted up, they're just given this, backpack full of boulders, and that's put on their shoulders. Just terrible, horrible things that happen in the context of various religions. And it's very unfortunate. But I wanted to go back to, not go back. I think this is actually your next question, Kelsey, that involves the 2012 prophecy, because you mentioned that earlier. And so obviously the church now will deny that was ever an official teaching, or that was ever really propagated in the church, or it was something the church taught, that the world would end in 2012. And so I guess, I'll just ask you, Ron, was the teaching that the world would end in 2012, was that something that was taught in the church?
On the pulpit. In the early days, for sure. That was the hook, line, and sinker, Jordan. I mean, that was it. If there's so many different religions, but if you're preaching about, hey, it's coming, it's right around the corner, and you better be in the right spot, standing on Zion, that's a pretty powerful teaching if you can get people to believe it. That teaching was, like I said, even Pastor Daniel in 2009, in front of the whole congregation, said that Mother said his passport would be here longer than he would, because we knew it was 2012 was the date, but it could be sooner than 2012. So we didn't know, when. But I told my family members, I said, I promise you 100% we won't be here after 2012. I said I'd put everything on it, because I learned it, and not only did I learn it, the prophecy seemed to make sense according to the Bible at the time. So it wasn't something they just said; it was something they showed through scriptures, and it had to do with a breakdown, a timeline breakdown, and it was pretty detailed.
And this is something, members that are kind of on the verge of leaving, one of the hangups that many people have is all the fear of what will happen if they leave the church. Well, what if the world ends? What if something terrible happens to me? What if I, going to the internet is evil and I'm going to die spiritually? Or if I leave the church, I'm going to be possessed by a demon. All these kind of fear-mongering ideas that are instilled, these phobias, as Steve Hassan would call them, that are instilled in members' minds to keep them kind of, again, as we say on these shows, kind of make them their own prison guard. They're locking the doors from the inside and keeping themselves inside, because the WMS has, methodically instilled these different fears to keep them in. But what examples like this, I think, demonstrate, as Ron is sharing, that one of the teachings of the church was that the end of the world would come in 2012. And I believe this is something that Ahnsahnghong, you can find in his writings, that he either alluded to or specifically taught. And so my point here is just to say, why would members be afraid about these things that the WMS has warned them about that would happen if they leave, if they've shown time and time again, as is the example with the 2012 prophecy, that they just get things wrong all the time. They are not correct about so many of the things that they teach about or warn about. And so my hope in members realizing that they did teach the end of the world would come in 2012 would be that they would realize that the WMS is just not a group that they should put a whole lot of trust in. That the things that they say, why would you put stock in the warnings they give you about leaving the church if they're making false prophecies? I think, to put it that way, just consider, what does the Bible say about those who make false prophecies? Well, it says they're false prophets. So why be concerned about the warnings that false prophets, defined biblically, are giving you about what's going to happen if you leave? And what I'm hoping we can get to also here soon with your story, Ron, is to kind of dive a little bit into your process of leaving, and just what members can see with you here, 12 years or so removed from leaving. You're alive and well and seem to be healthy and happy, something that the WMS just says is impossible and will not happen. But here you are. So Kelsey, did you want to cover, I know you had a list of some of the other points that, in the way the WMS addressed kind of this video that Ron did with Steve, and how you kind of the narrative that they spun. Are there any of these other questions that you want to give Ron a chance to respond to, or not questions, but more the accusations that the WMS kind of leveled at Ron, the lies that they kind of used to spin the story? Are there any of these other ones that you want to give him a chance to kind of clarify?
I mean, I think we covered most of them. The only other question that I had was, hearing. Because I'm sure you're aware of the impact that you had when you did your video with Steve. But like, how did it make you feel, or how does it make you feel how the church responded and how they still react to that video after all these years?
Understandably, once I know who they are and what they stand for, it makes complete sense. They want to self-preserve their agenda and their movement. But I don't feel like why would they say that about me? Because I have no real kinship to them anymore. Mm-hmm. Early days, when I first heard that, I was like, wow, why would anyone believe that? Like, mm-hmm. People that knew me there, why would they believe a lot of that stuff, But I think they have to cover for themselves. They have no choice. They've said so many things that they have to continue to cover for themselves at this point, But it really doesn't affect me much. I mean, when I first heard the things and everything that they were saying and everything, it was, I felt betrayed, of course, you know what I mean? Like, wow, I never got anything from them. I never got a paycheck. I never got anything. Everything I did was donating. We donated. We built the church in Sunland. In Canoga Park. We had committees of the people who made good money, and we would be the donators to build things. And I can't tell you how many thousands and thousands of dollars that I spent in that church. I didn't get anything from that church, but they have to self-preserve. So I get why they're doing what they're doing, but I think there's going to be a day of reckoning. But life is fantastic on the other side. Nothing happened. There was no fluke accident. There was no 2012 came and went. Everything's still fantastic, or as good as it can be, as far as the world goes. But nothing came from God and struck me down or struck my family or struck my children, or nothing like that happened.
So, I guess in terms of people that are leaving or just maybe have recently left, I know it can be a very disorienting, anxiety-ridden, fearful. You mentioned earlier the fear after even having left. You were still kind of, you were kind of processing in your mind. Okay, well, I'll keep Passover this year. Maybe I'll keep it again next year. Kind of just, planning out, still kind of being led by the indoctrination of the church. So just kind of how that just kind of shows how difficult that can be to really fully disconnect. And I think those early stages are the most difficult and again, disorienting, confusing, and people having all sorts of, I think, mental health issues that arise from it. So is there anything, I guess, that you would say as a way of encouragement or advice to people in that kind of situation, people who have recently left and are probably kind of right in the thick of really just feeling confused and afraid, wondering, did I make the wrong choice? What if this is the truth? What would you say in the way of encouraging those people?
Well, I would definitely say, definitely do your research, find out about cults, find out about what you were involved in. When people left the church earlier, it was always due to physical things. They left, something happened in their life and they fell away. I think this new generation of leaving the church is not because of some finances or, they lacked faith, and that's why they're back and forth and coming back and forth. I think the new generation, when they leave, it's because they found out, they found out something that was incorrect. So you don't get many people who have left the church nowadays that have been members for a while, and later on, a year or two later, they feel like, oh my gosh, I made the wrong decision and I need to go back. You don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
Once they got out, they researched, because the one thing you will do when you come out is you will research, because you want to make sure, am I making the right decision? I need to research and really, really make sure, because this is my life on the line. This is my salvation. And I think once you do that, there's nobody that I know that came out that did that has decided and said, wow, I was way wrong, I better go back. Nobody. I can't think of anybody. So I think researching is the key, and understanding, what was I in? Did I believe because I fully believed? Because it was something that I, with an open mind and inquiring mind, and I did research, and I studied hard, and I challenged information. If that wasn't the reason why you went in, then chances are you probably won't go back, because once you've researched and did that, when you came out, which most people usually will, because it's such a strong belief. You really believe you need to be standing on that mountain. That's the only mountain in the world, Mount Zion, Church of God, World Mission Society, the only place of salvation. So when you come out and you realize that you just left Mount Zion, the only place of salvation, you ultimately have to do research. You would have to do research, because you'd be so afraid. After doing research, you won't go back, because the research is, once you take the break from the church and do the research and find out, that's what solidified it for me. I was like, okay, I'm not making a mistake. There's no way God can say one thing and mean another. There's no way that God can, that would not be part of God's salvation work, for me to say there is no mother, but really there is. Now you better figure that out, which one I'm telling is the truth. That wouldn't make sense. So I think once you reason it out, do some research, stay away for a month or two. You can always go back. If you really feel like, you made a mistake, then go back. But nobody does when they come out and they've done their research. So I would just say, give yourself a break. It's okay. Step back for a minute. It's a really, really important thing. It has to do with sacrificing a lot of your life. It has to do with salvation. Take a little bit of a break, do a little bit of research. After you do the research, if you go back, fantastic. You can have a clean mind and say, I did all the research. Now I'm really ready to go. And no harm, no foul. But chances are you won't go back after you do the research, because you'll find out it's not the truth. It doesn't line up. It just doesn't line up with anything. Not what they've told us, and not what we've studied. So you can connect as many Bible verses as you want to make a story, but you can't get away from the things that are reality that have not matched up, that you've said are the case. Like whether it's the 37 years of preaching that Ahnsahnghong did, or whether it's the the when he was baptized, and what church he was baptized in. Once you learn about those things, they don't add up to what we ever learned inside the church. That was never told us, and they don't really match up with the prophecies either. So do your research, take a break and do some research. It doesn't matter if it's a lifetime commitment. A couple of months aren't going to matter much. You lived your whole life away from God, so to speak, if you were never religious. So take a couple of months and make sure you're getting into the right thing. That's what I did. That worked for me. It seemed to work for other people once they came out, and that's what I would recommend to anyone.
Yeah. And it's interesting how, I think you kind of alluded to it there, but how members don't get into the church initially because they did what you just encourage people to do. People don't get in because they're approached and they say, oh, okay, well, this, like you said, this is my life on the line. This is my children's lives on the line. This is my eternal salvation. let's go and figure out if this is actually the truth. If this is actually true, if the evidence backs it up, if what I'm been told can be substantiated with evidence, then I'm going to go into it. People do not get into this group because they do that. And I have people, actually it's becoming more and more common that people are reaching out to me who are saying, I've been in a Bible study for a month or two. I've been going to their Bible studies. I just watched a video, or I came across a video. So I went online and I just went and did my research to make sure I really want to get into this thing. And I realized this is not true. So the people who do, if you do the research up front, well, then you don't get into the church. People don't get into the church. And so on the flip side of that, if you've left, and you're struggling with the fear and the anxiety and the questions about maybe I made the wrong decision, I think that's such a simple and great encouragement to say, go do your research, because you've been told for years, many of you, that there's a boogeyman in the closet, that there's a boogeyman. And unless you do X, Y, and Z, that boogeyman's going to come out when you're not looking, and he's going to eat you alive. That's what you've been told. And so they've never opened the door to show you the evidence that there's a boogeyman in there. They just continue to tell you that he is. And they leave little, they'll come in the night and they'll put little footprints around to make you think that there's actually a boogeyman in there. But when you actually get brave enough, and the thing is too, they'll tell you if you go and open that door and look, well, you're going to die and something terrible will happen. So you never have the confidence to actually go and check for yourself. But if you will just go and open that door, if you'll just open the door, you're going to see, oh, wait a minute. The boogeyman that I've been afraid about all these years is not even in there. There is no boogeyman. And then you can have your life back. Then you can have your life back, and all the things you're afraid of, you can realize why there's no reason to be afraid of these things. The foundation of me even being afraid and questioning whether this is true or I made the right decision, that all dissipates into thin air when you just go and open that door. And opening that door just looks like going to the WMSCOG site and realizing, oh, wait a minute, you can find just one or two pieces of evidence, and there's hundreds of pieces of evidence that will tell you this is not true. Most only need a few to realize, okay, this isn't, this is not true. But just do that. Go online. You're not gonna die spiritually. Do the research. Do what you should have done initially, and I think that will be a huge help in you just having that fear, not really have a place in your life anymore.
And also don't, one of the big fears is that Satan is trying to deceive us. So the Satan has given us this information, but the way I feel is it's okay. Don't worry. If you're really a child of God, you got God on your side. You can be able to look at the information and discern whether who's from. I mean, if that's the case, then what's the point of having faith, and why are we being built up spiritually with spiritual weapons to fight, but yet we can't look at something on the internet because we'd fall right away? That's not a building up of spiritual weapons. If I have spiritual weapons and I'm built up and I'm strong in God, I can look at anything and say, nope, that's not true. That's not true. What I'm learning is true. But that's just not the case with this church, because their doctrine has too many holes. So the way around that is just don't look at anything at all. Instead of saying, hey, we've given you all the powerful tools, the weapons of God, now go out and you can look at anything because you've got the armor of God on. That's not the case. They preach a lot about the armor of God in all the Bible studies and how we're children of God and we're protected by God, but don't open up the door. Hey, wait a minute. I thought I had the power of God with all these weapons you gave me.
Right. What's the point of all this armor if every time there's the potential to fight, you're told to run away and hide?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's because when it really comes to when it comes to fear, like they put the fear in the members, right? That don't look online. You'll be deceived. But the fear actually belongs to the cult, because they're afraid you're going to look online and you're going to leave. And that means they're not going to be receiving your money or your time anymore.
Or
so
the numbers.
Fears, or the numbers, right? So the fear is really from them, and they're trying to transfer that fear on us so that we wouldn't
Yeah.
leave. But statistically, I mean, this was something I heard, like statistically, most people don't remain in cults forever. So the numbers, I mean, are against them. And so
unless they turn into like JWs and just become mainstream and kind of tone it down, and they just become part of our religious culture now. And that's what I think this cult will probably do. I think that's why they're toning it down, and then now they're just gonna, it'll be a money operation, and like anything else that starts out, because JW started, end time, and the false predictions, and it's a capture for people. It really is. It's a capture because, I mean, who doesn't want to be special and go to heaven and be this chosen one that was given this very secret, private information that the rest of the world doesn't know, and task you with the mission to go out and save all those lives, and what a reward that would be. Who doesn't want that kind of task, or that kind of glory, or that kind of honor, or that choosing from God? So yeah, it's a very, very tough thing. But if they end up going mainstream, which that's my kind of prediction, that they're not talking about certain things, they're just going to have regular members, and who knows, general pastor might take over if anything happens to the mother. But they could go that route. Who knows?
Yeah. If they want to survive long term, I think you're absolutely right. They've got to adjust, and they see that, and that's why you see these incremental adjustments over time, and that's just going to continue. They're going to have to do that. They're going to realize not because they want to do the right thing and adjust because it's the right thing to do, because they're recognizing what we've been doing previously is wrong and we need to turn in the right direction. But again, it's just going to come back to that self-preservation. They will throw out any of even the most core foundational doctrines or teachings that they've held up as just the most important. They'll throw them out in a heartbeat if they recognize that that's what it's going to take to keep the money coming in, to keep the members coming in, because they don't care. Their devotion is not to the Bible or even to God. It's to self-preservation. And so, I think you're absolutely right. And it's even a little bit concerning, because I think even when they do become more mainstream and they do tone it down, it'll be, I think, even that much more difficult for people to recognize what it really is. But I'll be glad, just for the simple fact that I think ultimately, as time goes on, I think people will less and less be experiencing the level of abuse and emotional and mental harm that so many are and have experienced in kind of this early infancy of this group, when they just kind of came out of the gate just swinging and full steam. We don't care who gets hurt or what happens. And I think they're going to learn from their mistakes. And like you said, they're going to have to, if they want to survive.
Yeah, and in order to accomplish the goal that they wanted to accomplish, which was occupying the entire world, or especially United States when they came here, you kind of have to have people who will devote 100% of their time. So that's what they were looking for. But I think as it balances out, I think that they're going to want people to actually work maybe and have good jobs, because it equals more revenue. And now they already have the churches set up, and but I think just coming here for the first time, that's what they were going with. And there's nothing that grabs the attention more. I mean, a church coming from Korea, just teaching regular Bible studies doesn't, it's not gonna produce like they wanted to. They were very aggressive. So when they first came here, you need people to devote 100% of their time. And that's what they were going for, especially youth members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they always went after the youth members, the 18 to 30-year-olds.
Yeah, and it's so funny because when I saw those videos of like Hector, Missionary Hector, and with the state official or whatever, praising them for doing the cleanup and everything. And I'm like, they're saying such wonderful things, and the way they're selling it to the church is almost or to the world, really, through videos, is that this man knows that about the second coming Christ, and he has no idea. He's going, "We love you," and
I know
they have no idea what they're doing. They're just saying it, but it's promoted as if look, even they're praising father and mother.
So one question I have for you,
Yeah,
Ron, is like for members that you knew that are still there, like Alex and Melvin, like do you have what advice do you have for them? Because these are people who, like, the people that you knew are probably leaders now, and they could be potentially watching this video. So what message would you have for them?
Oh man, I miss all those guys, man. I had we had great, the members are so beautiful. The members are so beautiful. I watched them come in. I watched their eagerness, their humbleness, and and their passion for really wanting to be saved. Their face would light up. They really wanted to be saved. Alex and Melvin and Alex used to ride their skateboards over. They used to have the handkerchiefs out of the back pocket, and they were skateboarders. Such good people. Um, yeah, I watched them have no uh, youth. To be honest, their youth was robbed from them. It just was. It was. Chris Hebert. You remember Chris Hebert, or did you know Chris? He was going to be a football player. He was
Wow.
unbelievable. He gave that up. Like so many other people, they just gave up their stuff. And I mean, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't to follow God if it's the true God? You want to follow the true God. I mean, you get a calling, and that's pretty natural. Paul did it. Everybody did it in the Bible. They wanted to give up their life and follow God. So I completely understand their reasoning and rationalize it, their rationalization for it. But I wish they would stop for a second and think, because it is their life, and we only get one of these. And you want to
Yeah.
make sure you're following the right thing and devoting your time to the right purpose and mission. So if they were ever watching this, I would let them know that uh, take a look at some other stuff. It's so hard because if you're in, you're in. If
Mm-hmm.
you're in, you're in.
hmm
Unless something happens, that's what when I went with Steve Hassan and a few times to try to help others get out. It's almost like there's got to be something that happens that
Right.
jolts the person. Whether it's, wow, that didn't seem right that the pastor was talking to someone like that, or degrading someone, or it's got to be something that jolts them, because if everything's running smooth, um, chances are you're just going to keep going with the flow. But
I agree.
I'm not Satan. I didn't want any power at the church. Um, I didn't sleep around at the church. What else? I wasn't, whatever you said this
Oh,
guy was.
you weren't paid by a
I
random
wasn't paid
Korean
by a
church?
Korean church. I'm just a guy who started looking, did some research, and left. That's very possible too, guys. It doesn't have to be, if anyone leaves, that there must be this major thing that they were trying to, uh, you know, do in the church or get from the church, or it doesn't always have to be a drama or some gossipy thing. It could just be someone just researched and left. It
Right.
happens all the time at churches. It's okay, guys. Do some research yourself, and if that's not the truth, then go off and try to find it.
Yeah, I think that's a really
Yeah.
good point. Take a break and do your research. And then if you're really, the what is it? They say the intentional versus unintentional sinner. If you're really the unintentional sinner, the one who's meant to go to heaven, the 144,000, like you'll still be the 144,000 at the
Sure.
end of the day if that's if you know like that's not gonna your action's not gonna change that. It's already predestined, right?
Yeah, and there's
So
plenty of Bible prophecy that shows that God's people turned away from God, and then they turned back to God. It's okay. They weren't
yeah,
done forever. They strayed away from God, and then they came back, and God had open arms. So um, if you're going full in on this and giving up everything, make sure you're doing it with the right information, and you'll feel better. You'll
yeah,
feel better knowing you did the research, the information, and then you found out it's the truth or it's not the truth. But it's
right,
better to have the information to make that informed decision.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Great.
So, and feel comfortable to answer or not answer this one, but I'm just curious because there's so many members that come out with that concern of, what's going to happen with my, walk with God, or no other church has the truth. So I'm just wondering kind of what your experience has been coming out. If you have maintained faith, if that's been something that's just been something that you've set to the side entirely, or I guess just kind of what that process is like, what the whole faith aspect, if that's been something you've continued in or just kind of let go.
Good question, Jordan. I actually, for the longest time, I didn't have much faith in any church institutions. Still believe that there's a God because I'm, in the medical field. I kind of look at the body as amazing and know that something definitely created it. There's no question in my mind at all. But definitely lost my faith in institutes, and a lot of it was based on this church too, because I had heard that they're all Babylons, and if I step foot in a Babylon, even after you leave, for anyone who is listening to this, even after you leave, you're going to feel uncomfortable for a while with organized institutions, religious institutions in particular. Yeah. But I just recently went to a church, and they had the band up on the stage. And I actually found it pretty nice. They were singing gospel music, and it was nice and, soft, but they did gospel music. And then they, it was the kind of service that I would have shunned before and said, this is, definitely not biblical, and they're going against God. But I went and kind of checked it out. And up until like about 6 months ago, we started doing like a weekly Bible study that I'm involved in, taking books at a time. We're in the book of Revelation right now, and it's interesting to hear, to be able to hear and contemplate other people's perspectives. So our Bible study consists of, about eight or nine people, and we look at verses and we kind of talk about them, and everyone has sometimes different opinions, sometimes the same opinion, but I think it's all important. It's all important. So you do end up getting back to it. You just get back to it in your time. It's in your time. There's no rush for it. But definitely you got to deprogram yourself a little bit, and that comes with time and space away from the cult. But I feel pretty good now. I've always felt good with God, even when I left. Just knew that wasn't the God, but I always felt good with God. Just didn't know where to go, and kind of felt like maybe I don't have to go anywhere. Maybe I'll find God on my own. Which sometimes that's not good either, because I think gathering is important, and that was the hard part, to get back into the gathering part, because I would always look at it as being phony, or this isn't real, or this isn't the truth. And here I am now. I'm falling back. I'm going into the Babylon churches. How far can I go? So I kind of stayed by myself for a while and just kind of did my own thing, just believing in God. But I actually start looking at people who are gathering, and I look at them differently. I look at them as really, really good people who are trying, who are trying to find God. They're not evil people. They're actually good people who are just trying to find God and trying to, have communion with people and be together with like-minded people who want to do good things in the world. They may not be studying all the Bible verses that we studied in the cult, but nonetheless, they're good people who want to do the right thing to other human beings and to God. And I never looked at, in the cult, we never looked at that as being special. We looked at that as not a big deal. That doesn't mean anything. Because if you're not in Zion, it doesn't matter how you look. You can look the most righteous and you could look the most friendly, but you're not God's people. So that changed. I start looking at everybody as God's people, and everyone's on a different journey. They'll get there when they get there, and it's not up to me, and it's not up to any particular church or anyone to say who is and who's not gonna make it. I think that's a God issue.
Yeah, I think that's so important to emphasize the fact that it's okay to take the time that one needs, and that you're okay in as much as you are taking time away from any sort of organized religion. And I think it's also just what you're communicating there, I think, is it's just this false notion that kind of the ultimate pursuit of faith is in finding the right place. I think this is just this WMS indoctrination that's so deeply ingrained in people that, you're not good until you have found the right place, the correct church, as if there's one church that's going to have it all right. I guarantee you, nobody has it all right. Not one. I don't have it all right.
Well, and usually
the person who tells you that they do have it all right,
yeah,
I would say run away from them quickly.
exactly.
Is that what you're going to say, Kelsey?
Usually they're problematic when they're the ones that we're the only ones that have the right answer.
Yes.
Usually they're the problematic ones.
Right. And the funny thing is,
the
funny thing is, I knew that before I went to this cult. Anyone who says they know it all, they're definitely don't know it all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's strange when you spend enough time somewhere. Yeah. It's that indoctrination. Yeah. Spend enough time. That's why the first thing is come to church. Come over and over and over again. The more time, the more indoctrination. You can get people to slaughter 6 million Jews. Strangely, if you indoctrinate enough, you can even make them believe that it's the right thing to do in the eyes of God.
Right.
Yep.
No, it's 100%.
Yeah. But it's just people can have space, and I think that's just what you're communicating is just, I think, what I would call what we're all supposed to have is just a childlike faith to know that this isn't about me. This isn't about me getting it right and figuring it all out as if God's just kind of frantically waiting for me to get it all right so he doesn't have to zap me with a lightning bolt. So if God is the sort of fatherly figure that Jesus seemed to so often want to communicate to us, that is what God is like, then you're okay with taking some time. He understands why you need to take the time, and he's supposed to be the shepherd, right? We are the sheep. And sheep by nature aren't very, they're not intelligent animals. And I think there's a reason we're compared to them, not to say we're not intelligent, but to show that it's not about the sheep figuring out how to get to the right pastures. The shepherd is the one who leads us and gets us there. And all he's asking for is that we just trust him in that. We trust him when we found a church to be a part of, or when we're so desperately confused that we can't even open our Bibles without it triggering us in 1,000 different ways. There's still a way to trust that God's going to work this out in the way he wants. And I'm going to give it to him. And so, I think that's so important for people to realize. And it's just one of those, again, such strongly ingrained fears that are just implanted so deeply into people's minds that cause them to feel like they have to come out and find the right place, or else it's that boogeyman again. It's that boogeyman. Any moment that boogeyman's going to come out and devour them if you don't do X, Y, and Z. And again, it's just realizing that there's no boogeyman in the closet. And so the fears are just irrational. So Kelsey, unless you had any other questions, I had one final question I wanted to ask, and then I'll just let you give any final thoughts, Ron, if there's anything else you want to share before we wrap this up. But my last question was just that, it's been a while since you've done anything public. I think Kelsey said, 10 years or so. And so I was just curious why you wanted to come on and why you felt it was something, that is important enough to spend, a couple hours doing this and kind of publicly sharing your story and responding to even some of these things that WMS has said about you over the years. Why do you think this is important to do?
To be honest, you guys are making an impact, because I started seeing Great Light Studios. Some things started popping up on my YouTube, and I kind of clicked on them. Also, some WMSCOG stuff is showing up too, where they're doing Bible studies now on YouTube, strangely. I've been watching these videos on Great Lights and just seeing more members, and then Jordan and Kelsey and you guys being more active and doing stuff. And also some of you guys having your own kind of YouTube channels and talking about this. And I just felt like it was, it's gaining some steam. And I thought, wow, I would love to go on and say about the early days in the church. I don't think many people talk about that on what it was like in the early days, because everyone that I talk to, I'm not shy about it. I always explain, hey, I was in a cult before. I believed in a woman in Korea that she was God, and I went to go see her 3 times, So I think, seeing that kind of steam and seeing that kind of enthusiasm out there, and I think a lot of people don't understand how you can, when you see it in its totality at the end, or like when you see all of it, you're like, how did you believe in that? How did you believe in all of that? My gosh, you're smarter than that. I think you have to understand the beginning when you first go, and how you're treated and how you're cultivated and how you're moved along and how the whole process works. It's important to understand that, because I think the more that gets out, and just cults in general and how they function, I think the more that people would be educated on not getting trapped into it and being, wasting 10 years, 12 years, 8 years, 2 years, 1 year. It's a lot of time. We're not guaranteed tomorrow, so it's quite a bit of time when you spend like that. And I think some people just don't know enough about how cults work. You're not going to see those things when you walk in the door. That's not how a cult works. If you walk in and you see people, we've all been to those churches, I'm sure, and you see people, drinking, snakes wrapped around them, and you're going to leave. You're probably going to walk out and go, this is insane. It's the ones that look perfect right away. Those are the ones that you have to really take your time with, research, and find out who they are. Who is this church? Like anything else, you should research the church, go online. When you first, there was a couple of people there was somebody online that was saying that she was preached to several times at the school, and then she went online. Very smart. Go online, check it out. And that's what that's their ambition to occupy your time right away, is so that you don't make those efforts. There's no other reason for it. Obviously, 2012 came and went, so there's no urgency. God's not right at the door. We were told it was going to be happening anytime, so we had an urgency. But as far as now, if you're preached to, go online and look. There's obviously no urgency. So, but strangely, if they're calling you off the hook and saying, you got to come, can you study? That's a red flag. When anyone is trying that hard, then that means they're not leaving it up to God anymore. They're putting it in their hands. If God is in control and he's moving minds and moving all these pieces, then you shouldn't have to do all of that. You can preach, invite, and maybe call in a week or so and see how that person's doing. That's not what they do at the Church of God. They call. There's a reason for that. It's because before you find out anything, we need to have you do several Bible studies, and we need to show you how nice we are, friendly, and that's the scam. That's the scam. It doesn't mean that you walk into a place and if they're doing that is a cult. It just means it could be. Take your time, and especially with something this important, getting to know who the creator of you and the universe is. I think you can step back for a little bit and maybe, put something in Google. I think God would be all right with it. I don't think God's hiding. I think God's like, if you look on Google, don't worry. It'll still prove me. Whatever you're thinking, I can't be disproved. So it's okay to look on Google.
Yeah. The truth has nothing to hide, and the truth is not afraid of a flashlight being shown on it.
That's right.
Lights not afraid of flashlights. So
agreed.
Yeah. Well, that was all great, Ron. I really appreciate you being willing to come and share your story. That definitely a unique perspective, because there's a lot of things you shared that I haven't heard before, especially about the early days and how it functioned, and the way again, as you were describing it, it just sounds like it's hard to believe that is the World Mission Society Church of God that you're describing, because it's so far removed from
shirts
how it
off,
is now.
Shirts off on the basketball court.
Well, yeah, and being late for and the pastor and everyone being late for service because they were playing basketball on a Sabbath day. Like, that just blows my mind.
Yeah, pastor would jump in a quick shower and be right up there for service. We'd still have sweat on our heads like this, and we'd be listening to service.
Wow. Yeah, not something you're going to see today.
No.
Well, I want to say one thing for a closing thing. I just want to say thank you, Ron, for all those years ago making that video with Steve Hassan and being brave enough, when nobody else was sharing their stories on YouTube. There was no Great Light Studios. Like, you stood alone at the forefront of this. So thank you for, being brave enough to put that out, and, and again, and how the church reacted to that. I mean, just thank you. I mean, I'm a testimony of, like, that video had an impact on me. And even though I saw it when I was in the church, like, I remembered it all those years, after I left. And because that was one of the things that I was doing when I left. I did my research and I was looking at everything. And when I rewatched your video, I remember now, because I was thinking last night when I rewatched your video last night, and I was like, this might be the first time that I saw this after I left. But then I realized, no, after I left, I did watch your video, and it helped. It, along with the examining site, helped solidify my decision in leaving, because everything you said, I had just taken a week break, and everything you said, I was like, okay, I saw very similar things. And for the things that I didn't see, like the abortion, I didn't personally see, people being asked to have abortions, but based on, how I saw how they viewed children and the things they said about children to parents, I was like, I can 100% believe that happened. So, just long story short, thank you so much for doing that.
I appreciate that, Kelsey. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. I don't, the great thing about YouTube and these platforms and all the members who continue to tell their stories is that these will continue to be available to anybody who's just willing to come and look for it. And so, your video that's been, I think it's about 12 years or so ago that you did this. So that's been on there, having who knows how many people watching that are, even just silently watching, getting the information, saying, okay, I'm out of here. I'm out of this, and getting their lives back. And so that's why I'm so appreciative, obviously, of you, Ron, coming on, and Kelsey and all the former members who continue to share, because really, I think I could have had the impact that Great Light Studios, whatever impact it has had, would be a very, very small fraction if it hadn't been for the former members being willing to say, hey, Jeremy, I think, was the first one who reached out and say, hey, I'd like to come on and share my story. And I think you guys just have a voice as having, spent years in the church, that just gives people, even if one part of their brain is saying this is a demon, this is a false prophet, a Judas or whatever, there's that other part that says, but I can relate to them, and they were in the church, and I can hear that in what they're describing. They're not making up these stories. They were there. And so, it just adds a whole other layer of it just being a compelling, push for people to rethink all of this.
Well, I'm very proud of what you guys are doing too. And I remember when Kelsey reached out to me when she first came out, and now look at her. She's
That's
she
a
had a lot
funny
of
story.
questions.
That's a
Yeah,
funny story.
yeah, she had a lot of questions. She was like, "Please, can I call you? I have some questions."
No, do you remember what I asked you to do? I don't know if you
No,
remember this. This is a funny story. So because again, they put like the fear of God in us about you. Like
Yeah.
nobody even like dared say your name to another person. So I had seen. I think I looked you up on Facebook and I saw a picture and I was like, this looks like him, but I'm not 100% sure. So I messaged you on Facebook and I remember I was like, hey, can you take a picture of yourself and
I
write
do
your
remember
name
that.
and your date so I know?
I do remember that. I do
Because
remember
I thought it
that.
might have been the church creating a fake profile in
Right,
case somebody tried to reach out to him.
right. I do remember that, Kelsey.
Yeah.
I remember that clearly.
Yeah.
And see, that's what makes you good at what you're doing now. Because you have you have that ability. I do remember that. I was in Texas at the time. Yep. I do remember that. And you guys are killing it. You and Jordan and all of you guys are killing it, man. You guys are doing really, really good work. Keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. And Jordan, fantastic. I don't know where you came from or how you linked up with everybody here, but you're like a part of us now.
Yeah, he is. Honorary member.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Honorary
you're
member.
part of us.
Yeah. It's been a fun journey, and I think we've got a long ways to go. A lot of things left to do, but
Great. Well, reach
yeah,
out to me anytime you guys need to for anything. Let me know how I can help or anything like that. No problem.